The following program contains an important discussion on a topic that some viewers may find uncomfortable. This topic may not be suitable for young children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Sponsored by
Crime Victims Resource Center. 40 years of providing direct assistance and advocacy services at no charge to victims of crime, regardless of age, gender, or ethnic background.
Pizza Ranch of Austin, with a vision to glorify God by positively impacting the world and to give every guest a legendary experience.
Autumn Ridge Church of Rochester, proud to partner with Mission 21 in ministry to young women impacted by human trafficking.
Mission 21 of Rochester, support for youth survivors of human trafficking, opportunities to process past experiences, meet other survivors, set goals, and encourage healthy choices.
It is happening in Rochester, it's happening in Olmsted County, it's happening in every community in our state.
You cannot buy a human being. I don't care if they're okay with it or not.
Every 30 seconds, another person is forced into human trafficking.
The average age of entry into the sex trade is 12 to 14 years old.
There is no 8 or 10-year-old girl that says to her mom, I want to grow up to be a prostitute. No John, no pimp is going to walk out of here without a conviction for sex trafficking. Back in the day, the only way to advertise, to market themselves, was in the yellow pages, the escort services, things like that.
It's not in your face like it used to be in the old days where people were actually walking the streets in their stilettos. It's online, it's very undercover. Instead
of being local business, local enterprise, it really has become a much more interstate, global enterprise. Probably the easiest way for me to share the evolution of human trafficking is my personal evolution. It was in about 2009, somewhere in there, that the Sisters of St. Francis invited me to be on a panel discussion about human trafficking. And I said at the time, I'll be happy to sit on this panel, but we don't have that going on in our community.
We had an incident where a woman was being dragged down the highway outside of a car. She eventually fell off there, and that's where I met Vanity. And by my conversation with Vanity, I realized all that I didn't know about sex trafficking.
Human trafficking is violence, physical, mental, emotional, psychological. It's an extension of slavery. You cannot buy a human being. I don't care if they're okay with it or not. Slaving days are over.
Well, definitely from the very beginning, back in 2010, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about what this issue was. And so we had to do a lot of community education, and we had a lot of people in our community tell us that we were wasting our time, that this absolutely is not happening in Rochester, Minnesota.
You can see that door right there on the back of that where the lock is drilled out of there. That is the door that goes up to these rooms here, which we believe are frequently used for sex trafficking.
Rochester is actually a spot that a lot of stuff is going on. It's been going on. I was in Rochester. My pimp took me there on a number of days. So for people to act like, oh, this just got here, no, I'm 53. It's been there, okay?
We knew that this wasn't just a big city problem. We live in a really great community. Rochester is an awesome community, and I think it's also a really safe community in compared to other places in the country. But the reality is that wherever there are kids, there's going to be vulnerabilities, and there's also going to be people who are going to take advantage of those vulnerabilities.
I know that we had a 12-year-old girl abducted from the city of Rochester and taken up and trafficked in Minneapolis and farther north. It is happening in our community.
The circumstances and the way that individuals get involved varies. It's from runaways to abused or battered, sexually assaulted youth or older individuals, because this happens to women and children mainly, but men also, and boys.
We know that boys are being trafficked. They're being trafficked at probably almost as high a rate as females.
I'd say that the majority of the kids that we work with have parents that love them very much, and that their parenting and their love for them, or how much they care for them, really didn't deter a trafficker from targeting their child. Statistically, within the first 48 hours of a kid running away, they will be approached by a trafficker. We've had kids who were in their bedrooms while their parents were in the home, and parents didn't even know that that was happening. So there's different types of traffickers. The one that stands out the most, or maybe is used the most, that we see is the Romeo pimp. This is a boyfriend who comes in and starts a relationship with a person. But the other ones that we have to be aware of, one that's called a CEO pimp, and he or she will promote themselves as a business owner or someone who can introduce them to either the music industry or maybe modeling, or maybe it's something as simple as hosting at a restaurant, an opportunity for you to travel. We also have what's known as a guerrilla pimp. And so a guerrilla pimp is a pimp, a trafficker that uses extreme violence to get their victims to be complicit. So they skip that grooming period, and it is just beatings and sexual assault and all sorts of different ways to torment their victim.
I can run quite a long ways, not particularly very fast, but I can just kind of keep going, and so we've used that to draw attention to events that we are passionate about. We do what we call kind of insane things for humanity to help draw attention to these causes. 300 Miles for Freedom is a 300-mile triathlon that starts in my hometown of Grand Rapids and comes all the way down to Austin, Minnesota. And so what it is it's a 5-mile swim, a 240-mile bike, and a 55-mile run. And so the goal is to encompass most of the state of Minnesota and try to raise awareness as we cross the state to stir things up a little bit, and raise money to help fight human trafficking.
As we've now seen this huge evolution of the internet, one of the things we've learned is that the marketing piece, they can put up their ads and take them down in matters of seconds. These folks ride a circuit. I mean, we know the circuit where they're going and how they go community to community. And as they're driving from, for example, Minneapolis, St. Paul to Rochester, on the drive, they're putting up their ad. And as they pull out of town, they take it down.
Vanity just had been working on a dance circuit. She called it a dance circuit, an exotic dancer, and they traveled from Milwaukee to Chicago to Austin to Albert Lee, up north to Duluth, and south again to Des Moines, and then across to the Dakotas, where there's a lot of sex trafficking going on around the oil fields. Anything that feels wrong, when you see an older man with a young boy or a young girl and they don't look like they belong together, for whatever reason it just feels wrong. It's not grandpa and a grandchild, it's not Uncle Bob and a young girl, and you can feel that. You can feel that something is wrong.
If you have a youth that used to be vibrant and happy and talked all the time, and now all of a sudden they're withdrawn, those are warning signs that something's going on. Now, we're not going to say it's specifically sexual exploitation, but it's the beginning of putting them in a risk category because there's something happening to them that's out of the norm. So if the routine changes, they start wearing different clothes and you didn't buy them, they don't have jobs, they're coming up with expensive gadgets, they're missing school, They're hanging out with older individuals.
What you see is that it's actually happening in our own backyard, and my eyes have been opened quite a bit in this whole process.
So Mission 21 is an anti-trafficking service provider in the state of Minnesota. We work with youth victims of sex trafficking. I would say that the girls that are being referred to our program, they come from a variety of different backgrounds. They are from different ethnicities, different families, different social economic backgrounds as well. The main goal for them is for them to move into a season of recovery, of restoration, of healing, and for them to have a place where they can talk about their experiences. A child survivor of sex trafficking looks just like you did when you were 12, 14 years old. It really can be anybody. What I've seen though, the difference is the ages of first intervention, those getting younger, which is a good indication of how much work is being done to raise awareness within these first responders. So those first responders being the social workers in child protection and child welfare, to the law enforcement officers that were doing stings, to our Olmsted County Attorney's Office and victim services as well.
Law enforcement's viewing it differently. They're doing a very good job at looking at individuals as victims instead of as criminals.
Part of our philosophy is to give victims a chance to get out.
With early intervention, which is good, we're seeing that the girls haven't experienced a whole lot of violence at that time. And so they're still in this grooming, or what we call like a honeymoon phase, a dating phase with a trafficker, who they're not identifying as a trafficker, but identifying as a boyfriend.
So I got up about 4:30 in the morning to start the last 110 miles of the bike, and I was sitting there with the hatch open in the back of the minivan, just kind of staring into space, and it was cold. I was supposed to be getting my gear on, and my wife's sitting there, and I just looked at her and I'm like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. She just kind of leans over and whispers to me, and she's like, well, you got to think about the pain that all these people are going through, and she goes, sorry, but you're going to have to get back out there. So that's what we did.
It's
only a half hour behind. Yeah. Take it. I was dead.
One of the things we're trying to ramp up right now is a community education to make people aware to look for it. So whether it's emergency rooms or social services or hotel personnel or law enforcement or any of these places where we could come into contact, we want to start right now to educate people to understand what trafficking looks like.
We've had really good cooperation from most of the hotels and the truck stops in our area. The hotels are training their staff. They're bringing us in to train staff for what to look for, to target or to spot sex trafficking, such as the guy coming in with the young boy or the guy coming in with the young girl that just doesn't feel right. They're cleaning rooms and seeing numerous cell phones and condoms and lubricant, and they've got people coming in that want the same hotel room all the time. It's the way on the end, and they stay for 2 or 3 days. They don't bring much luggage. I want the community to know that it's happening here, and we're also educating them on the fact that these people involved in this, the traffickers are brutal. They don't care about the people that are being trafficked at all. That these young girls are not involved, and young boys, because they like it. They're involved because they don't see another way out. If you've got a young boy with a $200 a day drug habit and he can't keep up by selling drugs, he's going to have to make that money some way. He's out there at the bathrooms in parks, he's at anywhere that men congregate by themselves and making himself available.
One of the things that survivors will mention is how while they were in the life of prostitution, they were looked at as the lowest in the society and that no one really cared about them. And there's a survivor leader who has said that she would rather be called a murderer than be called a prostitute.
Starting with the Johns, the person that is actually trying to buy the services, because of the way the investigations unfold in Olmsted County, they're almost always a gross misdemeanor charge. In other words, the maximum penalty is at least a year in jail or up to a year in jail and a $3,000 fine. For the pimp, the person that's actually out there marketing somebody, that will be a felony charge. So the penalty could be anywhere above a year and a day in jail and or several $1,000s in fines. The penalty for a pimp will be even more if it involves a juvenile. There are some other jurisdictions who are more willing, perhaps because of volume, are more willing to give somebody that first break. We've taken the position here that that's not going to happen.
More and more traffickers are using online websites to promote the girls that are a part of the trafficking ring.
I put in an ad in the paper, or ad in online, for a prostitute. And we got 200 calls in no time at all. The phone just never stopped ringing. We were surprised when we did the first John stings at the influx of calls early in the morning. They started calling at 4 or 5 a.m. and wanting appointments at 6 and 7 in the morning. We had a big influx at noon over the lunch hour that we were inundated with requests for time slots during the lunch hour, mid-afternoon, right after work, and then some in the early evening, that when you can still get away from your wife or your girlfriend without suspicion.
Backpage recently has agreed to take down that escort section of their page, and it's after years and years of pressure. Is it going to end trafficking? No. Somebody else will pick it up.
The Johns that we've arrested, who have called and that we've had contact with, are average every day, for the majority, middle-aged to older white males. They're everyday working people. They're the truck drivers, they're the salesmen, they're the parts guy at the implement place. They're in every walk of life. They're teachers, one claimed to be a doctor. They're everybody everywhere. And they are making excuses. They've got a dentist appointment, they've got to stop and pick up parts, they've got a meeting before work, they've got a meeting after work. We published the photos of the people we arrested, and it brought a lot of attention.
Probably the most surprising element of all of this prosecution has been that, number one, it's so easy, and number two, instead of going away, there doesn't seem to be an end to it. Despite all this information, people are still going out there trying to hire women.
One of the things that we've done most recently is to send out letters to all our callers. The letters that we send out are going to the registered owners of the telephone. Sometimes that is your employer, sometimes that's your wife or your girlfriend, and you're not going to be able to keep your dirty little secret a secret if somebody else opens that letter and finds out that the phone that you're using was the one that called this ad and either engaged in conversation or left a message. I want the wives and the girlfriends to be aware that while they thought they were in a safe, monogamous relationship, they're not. They're with a man who has just been with a woman or a boy or a girl who's been with 1,000. So you just multiplied your risk of sexually transmitted diseases unbelievably.
Every time I get low, my wife comes up to me and sees me struggling. She just reminds me why we're doing it, and reminds me there's thousands of people out there that are suffering way more than we are.
It was a little bit overwhelming to see this person who was really at that time still a stranger, who had never had an interaction with any of the girls here, care so deeply for them, to be waking up so early in the morning to swim 5 miles in a lake.
It's very hard for anybody caught up in the sex industry to admit being a victim. So they pretend that this is what they like to do.
Just leave. That's a question that is opposed to individuals like myself in this lifestyle. Why don't you just leave? Because when you leave, where do you go to? Will society welcome me back with open arms? Are they going to embrace me and give me a job? When it comes to sexual exploitation, we have a relationship with almost, I'm throwing a number out there of 90% of us, have some kind of relationship with the individual that we are being exploited by. We don't see, some of us don't see it as exploited because it's like we're a team. That individual cares about me, that individual takes care of me, they provide for me, even though it's my money doing it, I don't see it like that. A lot of us in this look at it as, I'm helping him and he's helping me. We're working together, and you want me to leave him. Well, depending on what my background is or was, he might have saved me from being sexually molested by my father. So you're saying he's a bad guy. Well, no, my father was the bad guy. This is what a lot of our girls have said. When you look at having someone care for you, someone tell you you're pretty, if you've never been told that, this is the person who did all that. Okay, we're falling on hard times right now. There's a few difficulties that have happened during our relationship, because to us it's a relationship. This person and I are against the world, and everyone tells me I should leave, he's a bad person. The violence and the abuse, a lot of times we blame it on ourselves that we caused it, just like domestic violence. The same tactics of power and control happen, and the girls around you will convince you and say, girl, he loves you. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing all that crazy stuff. So you believe it.
There are some days we ask ourselves, do people care? I mean, this is still happening, regardless of all the awareness and education that we're putting out.
The callers that we started out with, the fake ad, getting 250 calls in a day, we're down to about half that, sometimes even less than that. So the word is getting out, and people are more cautious.
You've got to stop the demand. And so part of the stopping the demand is increasing the penalties.
Buyers, sellers. These guys sell what these guys want. So let's focus on stopping them. These guys will go find something else to do with their time. There will not be victims like me anymore.
Those who think they're crazy enough to change the world usually do.
In Olmsted County, we hold a pretty hard line. I will not negotiate these cases away. No John, no pimp is going to walk out of here without a conviction for sex trafficking.
We raised a ton of local awareness, and so there's so many more people that have their eyes open that didn't before. You know, it's a dark subject that people just tend to want to sweep under the rug and pretend doesn't exist, and that's just simply not going to cut it.
This obviously is a cause that is near and dear to a lot of women, and I also work in Austin High School, and I know that we have girls that are being targeted for sex trafficking in our own communities.
So I think we've made, a huge impact, and we're pretty excited about that, not to mention that we raised, probably close to $48,000 to help provide to a couple charities that are doing some great work with so it's neat to see.
Seeing all those people there and seeing him cross that finish line was really, really encouraging to us. And that he was an athlete and that he was going to use that passion to raise awareness and raise funds to support the services that we provide here for the girls. And I was there doing a Facebook Live post, and I know some of the girls in our program watched that post, and they were also just as touched and just as floored. And seeing that crowd, they had no idea that all those people even cared about them.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.